So today I want to discuss a very important topic within the sugya of Hilchos Tefillah, but this is something that is going to be Nogeya be'ezus Hashem every single day of your entire lifetime. There isn't a day that I know of that this halacha, what we're dealing with today, will not be Nogeya, number one. And number two, Zevi, it's a very chomer inyan as well. It's something that I don't think I've ever spoken about before. It's something that I will admit to you is a very hard thing to really do properly. But the reason you'll ask me, so why am I talking about it if it's so hard? The reason I'm talking about it is because if it can help one person once to help himself in this inyan, I think it will be worth it. Halavai every day once also. But I think even the fact that we spoke about it is something important. It's a very simple halacha, but it's halacha that unfortunately we all suffer from this regilas, this habit of doing something very, very often. That is as follows. There's a Mordecai Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah in Shari Tshuva writes, and he brings a pasuk, Lo yisechalu Hashem kodshi, which is one of the most chomer averas of a person, basically to cause a chilul Hashem. But really what it means is, do not make chol my name. Which says Rabbeinu Yonah, he of Krisus, there are two ways for a person to be over in this halacha. Number one, to maskirim shem shemaim levatola, to say the shem Hashem levatola, when it's not meant to be said in vain. And number two, Rabbi Sai, this is today's halacha, maskirim bli moira, to say Hashem's name without fear, without even thinking. Now again, Rabbi Sai, and I speak to myself as much as I was speaking to you, I promise you. We say Hashem's name hundreds and hundreds of times a day, right? Literally. Go through Shachris over 100 times just during Shachris. You've got Mincha, you've got Ma'av, you've got Birchas Hamazon, you've got Asher Yotza, you've got regular brachos you make on coffee and tea and whatever it may be that you're doing the whole day. You make brachos the whole time. How many times have you heard somebody say a bracha? You can barely even hear the Shem Hashem. You can hear the Baruch Atah, maybe. You can hear the Niyeh B'Dvaroi, maybe. And in between, it's like a little bit of a mumble. Now, Rabbi Sai, Rabbeinu Yonah tells us that when you say Hashem's name without fear, you're over an Issa D'Oraisa of Krisis on saying Hashem's name, not Levatola, because it's not Levatola, because you're saying it because I'm making a bracha on a coffee or whatever, but you're saying it B'li Moira. Matisyahu Zatzal, Matisyahu Solomon brings down in his beautiful sefer Magdas Halka, he brings on the Shari Tshuva, that it's a mamash of karis over here. Now, it's very hard for us to really have kavanah every time we say Hashem's name. We're not on that level. At least me. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'm on that level. To say Hashem's name every single time with kavanah, whoa. But maybe like even once a day, maybe, perhaps. Let me just spell out some of the inyonim that we're talking about over here to understand what's going on. There's a Mordecai chinuch. I'm giving you some marmakomis just so you should know it's not brought down in Shulchan Aruch, but there's many psukim that the Rishonim and Achronim bring as a makor source for this halacha. There's a chinuch, you look it up, a mitzvah lamed, chayiv lahaske shem Hashem be'emo be'yira. It's not the pshat, you got to say it properly. We're not saying say Hashem's name with the right pronunciation. Maybe we'll get to that. We'll talk about what it even means. Maybe we'll have a minute to talk about that. He's talking about Be'ema Be'yira. You're saying Hashem's name. What are you doing? Stop rattling it off. Now again, we say it hundreds of times a day. So like, what do you want from us? Maybe the first time we say it, we should say it with kavanah. Maybe we should pick one bracha. That this bracha we're going to say Hashem's name with kavanah. Slowly, properly. There's a Reishis Chachma, scary Reishis Chachma. If you ever learned Reishis Chachma, it's a scary sefer stamazai. It's in Shara Yira. Mitzvah Gedoyla. Mitzvah Gedoyla, he says, that your entire body should be shaking when you say Hashem's name. And he says, it's your Makayim, a mitzvah of Hashem Elokecha too. So it's a serious chiyuv. The Chaya Odom, by the way, also in Klal Hey, writes that a person should be fearful. Lashon of the Chaya Odom. I'll say in English. His limbs should be shaking when he says Hashem's name, not just Yud Kei Vav Kei, but every name of Hashem should be said with all fear and concentration. The Tzos Chaim brings down that if you daven from a siddur, it definitely helps with your kavanah. That's stamazoi with every tefillah is that way. Whenever you look inside the words of a tefillah, and whenever you daven, you look inside, even if you know it by heart, it's always kedai. When you say it louder, it also helps. When you mumble it or say it in your head, forget about it. But when you're actually saying it loud, when your ears can hear the words that you're saying, which is, by the way, what you're meant to, for sure by certain parts of tefillah, then for sure that is the best thing for a person to do. Now, what's the pshat in this? What's the pshat that a person has to have so much kavanah? Where does this come from? Like, what's the reason? So just to give you an idea, the Derech Hashem, by the way, the Ramchal brings this in Derech Hashem, that he says, he doesn't bring the moshel, but imagine if you have a yosem, someone that was basically grew up as a young little baby without parents, Rachmana litzlan, no mother, no father. Is there any reason really for him to give himself a name? There's no one really looking after him. The answer is no. There's no real name, no reason to give himself a name. The only reason he gives himself a name is for others to be able to address him, to talk to him. So Rabbi, let me tell you what the Derech Hashem says. The Torah tells us that the names of Hashem actually bring down Shefa into the world. Okay? And we know this from a pasuk in Shemois Chof Aleph, B'chol mokem asher askeh shemi, ovoi eilecha oveirachticha. The pasuk says, wherever I permit my name to be mentioned, I will come and bless you. Which means that whenever you say Hashem's name, obviously in the correct time, in the correct place, you're bringing bracha down into the world and into yourself as well. So the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem the following idea. The Ramchal says that he goes on to a very long shtickle, which we're not going to go into now, but he says that the Rabbeinu Shalom specifically wanted to be called by a name so that his creations, meaning us, would be inspired to call him, remember him, and develop a close relationship with him. When you have a relationship with someone, you call them by their name. It's brought down, by the way, our Peter Zohar Kodesh. If you want to get to someone's neshama, you call them by their name. Of course, it means their Hebrew name, their real name. But when you call someone by their name, you develop a close relationship with them. When you don't know someone, you don't call them by their name. Or, when you have no shaykhs to the person, you have no right to call them by their name. But when you want to develop a close relationship with someone, when you have a close relationship with someone, you call them by their name. Says the Derech Hashem, the reason that the Rabbeinu Shalom created names for himself is not for himself, it's for us to develop a relationship with him so we can call him by those names and develop a relationship with him. And that's very, very important. And that's why the Rabbeinu Shalom says the Derech Hashem Be'etzem designated one name to be called for his honor. But however, he gave himself many other names as well to describe different sorts of brachas and things like that. So let me give you, I'll tell you what the Torah says. Right? The Torah's a Rishon, Siman Hey, Norach Chaim. The Torah brings down, what am I meant to think about when I say Hashem's name? Right, so by the way, before we even get there, let me just make very, very careful over here. Before we get to kavanas, and if you're not holding by kavanas, don't do kavanas. Just say the name with intention, with concentration, with the syllables. Express the word, say the words, say the letters. That's the first stage. When you pass that stage, or if you're already doing that already, then you can get to the Torah. The Torah gives us a little bit of an overview. What are you meant to think about when you utter the name of Hashem? And he says there are a few names. There's, for example, Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, Adonai, which a person says, the Torah says, when you say that word, you have in mind that Hashem is the master of everything. That's what you think about when you say the word Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. Now, when you read the word Yud, K, Vov, K, which is also pronounced Adonai, you should also have in mind that Hashem was, is, and will be forever. That's the kavanah during that one. And then when you have Elokim, then you should, meaning Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem, you should have in mind that Hashem is the Almighty, all-powerful, and the sole power in the upper and lower worlds. Now, Rabbi said this is a high madrega for a person to think about when he's thinking about Shem Hashem. So I'm not sure if we're holding there, or maybe I'm talking to myself, but at least to say the words, when you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Sha'akol Niyeh B'Dvaroi, try and see if you actually say all the words. Right? Maybe you have kavanah, as we said, even once a day, and you should know the tremendous bracha, unbelievable. simple. There's a Modik Shlach Kodesh. The Shlach Kodesh brings down, it's a Masechtas Tomid, in their mitzvah ois test, look it up. He says, what's the reason why people daven and they're not answered? So many times we daven for things and we don't seem that we're getting answered. So Shlach Kodesh addresses the question, why is it that we're not being answered for all the tefillahs that we seem to be davening for things that we really want, that we feel we really need? So maybe the Rabban Shem doesn't want to give it to us. Maybe it's not the right time. There's many, many answers to that. But one answer, says the Shlach Kodesh, is mipnei she'en yodin espala b'shem ha'mafur. They're not saying Hashem's name correctly. So Nechanami the Bnei Sasra explains Pshat and the Shlach Avad is talking about Shem ha'mafurish mamish that they used to use in the Beis Hamikdash. Those words that you have in Birchas Kahanim that you don't say, whatever. But Akoponim Avad it also means Hashem's name. Moshe Shterbuch in Chuvas Van Hogas Chelet Dalet in the beginning says over there, Ashrei Hanoi K'Shulchan Aruch. He says the Moshe Shlomo, that's his lashon. Praiseworthy is the person that's noig that the Shulchan Aruch, the B'chal Eskoy Shem Avaya, Machaven Hoya Oiviv, okay, or Bekach Ma'orish Tivrasim Miskabeles. When the person thinks about what he's doing and thinks about what he's saying, he allows his tefillah to be accepted in Shemayim. There's an Eben Ezra and the Kli Yakar as well. Mitzvah Loisah say they bring down that the zilzul in Hashem's name causes the Aricha Sagolas. The reason that we're in this Golas for such a long time with all the tragedies and everything we're experiencing is because we're not pronouncing Hashem's name correctly. But he says that's the punishment. But the Midah Tova, the reward for a person is even greater than what the punishment would be. Which means that every time you say Hashem's name with the correct kavanah, or at least saying the syllables, you're mimakarev, you're being closer the geula. There's a Modik of Vilna Gaon, the Quran, Divrei Yomim, in Perik Aleph says that when a person's maskir and Shem Hashem, maybe Yeshua, he brings rayas. You want Yeshua in your life, you want salvation, you want gewaldige things to happen, says the Vilna Gaon, make sure you mention Hashem's name with the right kavanah. There's no Chaim also, Tefillah Lamed Zayin, he brings a Rosh, the Ikka Kol Brachos Ushoyim Oso B'Kavanah, the Ikka of all Brachos Say B'Kavanah, Ki Kol Dov Sheda B'Kavanah in Extra B'Klum, anything that's said with that kavanah is not mentioned anything, but Oid, She'on Shegod Shemaska Hashem Nichbot Shle B'Kavanah. When a person mentions Hashem's name without kavanah, tremendous punishment. There's a famous time in the Hogan brings the Sefer Chassidim of stories of people that came back to this world because they didn't say the right kavanah. So Rabbi Yisrael, I'm just going to read to you the last thing that I'm going to do today is read to you the lashon of the Yisod V'Shosh V'Avoda. But Rabbi Yisrael, just think about it. We say Hashem's name many, many times. And when we say a bracha, we say Hashem's name. In Shemon Esrei, we say Hashem's name. Even in Pesukah the Zimmer, even in Yechovah, you know how many times Hashem's name is written in these places. You've got to stop and think what you're doing and realize you're saying Hashem's name. There's a chiyuv gomer for a person to mekayim various psukim, to say Hashem's name with the right kavanah. The Yisod V'Shosh V'Avoda, at the end of Perek Mishnah in Shar Chamishi, brings down, Lachein achai v'reya, my brothers, my friends, simu levavchem chol hadvarim ha'ela, take this matter to heart. And he talks about how a person has to try to make sure to prepare himself before davening, to have the right kavanah. Or if you're making a bracha, think for a moment, what am I saying? What word am I about to say over here? And he says, v'oz, and then if you do that, yinotzah mimela, you'll be saved from saying Hashem's name, levatola, or beli kavanah, rachmana litzlan, or beprat, he says, there are certain sections of davening that have loads of Hashem's name. Be extremely careful. And then if you follow this instruction, you will be called a son of the Melech. Wow, you'll be a person that walks through all the storehouses of the king without anyone objecting. Rabbi Sai, the key of all bracha is in every bracha, is in Hashem's name. As we said from the beginning, from the Ramchal and Derech Hashem, that a person says Hashem's name, it brings the bracha down to the world and specifically to himself. People complain, why am I not having, bracha in my life? This could be one of the reasons, as we gave Mar Mekoimas. Rabbi Sai, you're about to make a bracha on a coffee, Sha'akol Nihiyeh B'Dvaroi, which even those words, Sha'akol Nihiyeh B'Dvaroi, is amazing. But the words you say before, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Olam, think you're about to say Hashem's name twice in two different forms. Think about, you make a bar nefashos, think about Mincha Shemona Esra. Before you do something, think about it. And Be'ez Hashem, if we do that, we'll be Zoicha, as we said, to Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, to bring all the brachas down and not Chas V'Shalom cause Echel Hashem in this world. Have an amazing, beautiful day.